August 2014. The humid Baltimore morning air hung thick with anticipation as three unmarked police vehicles pulled into the crumbling parking lot of St. Catherine's Parish Clinic on East Monument Street. Detective Maria Rodriguez was reviewing case files in her downtown office when the call came through at 7:43 a.m. that would shatter decades of silence. What began as a routine follow-up on advanced DNA testing results transformed into the arrest that would rock Baltimore's tight-knit Catholic community to its core. The pediatric wing of the clinic, where children's laughter once echoed through sterile hallways, fell silent as officers moved through the building. Nurse practitioners who had worked alongside the suspect for over 15 years watched in stunned disbelief as handcuffs clicked into place. The arrest warrant bore a name that had appeared on hospital Christmas cards, charity fundraiser committees, and dozens of commendation letters from grateful families. But beneath that respected facade lay the solution to Baltimore's most haunting cold case from 1966, a mystery that had consumed investigators and destroyed families for nearly half a century. If you're fascinated by the details mainstream media glosses over, hit that like button and subscribe, because this case reveals how evil can hide behind the most trusted faces in our communities. The victim, whose death would remain unsolved for 48 years, was Margaret Ann Sullivan. Born on a snowy December morning in 1946 to Irish immigrant parents who had built their American dream one brick at a time. Standing 5 feet 7 inches tall with shoulder-length auburn hair that caught sunlight like copper wire, Margaret possessed striking green eyes that friends described as capable of conveying both fierce determination and gentle compassion within moments of each other. Her athletic build reflected years of competitive swimming at Baltimore's YMCA, while a distinctive crescent-shaped scar above her left eyebrow served as a permanent reminder of a childhood accident involving her older brother's bicycle. Margaret's father, Patrick Sullivan, worked double shifts at Bethlehem Steel's Sparrows Point plant, his calloused hands testament to decades of honest labor that barely stretched to cover the family's modest needs. Her mother, Bridget O'Malley Sullivan, took in sewing from neighborhood families, her nimble fingers creating intricate alterations late into the evening hours. The Sullivan household on South Conkling Street embodied the working-class Catholic values that defined East Baltimore in the 1960s, where children were expected to contribute, education was treasured, and Sunday Mass attendance was non-negotiable. Margaret had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered, recalled her childhood friend Patricia McKenna during a 2010 interview. She'd spend her lunch money buying milk for kids who couldn't afford it, then go hungry herself, rather than ask anyone for help. Her younger sister Catherine remembered Margaret's fierce protective instincts, recounting how she once confronted 3 older boys who were bullying a neighborhood child with special needs. Margaret's dreams extended far beyond the narrow row house where she shared a bedroom with her sister, filling notebooks with detailed plans to become Baltimore's first Irish-American female physician. Working as a part-time receptionist at Dr. E. Edmund Hartley's family practice on Eastern Avenue, Margaret had impressed the elderly physician with her natural ability to calm frightened children and comfort worried mothers. Her daily routine included morning mass at St. Casimir's, afternoon shifts at the clinic, and evening study sessions at the Enoch Pratt Free Library, where she methodically prepared for her college entrance examinations. Friends described her as possessing an old soul trapped in a 19-year-old body, someone who approached life with the seriousness of a person who understood that opportunities were precious and fleeting. Baltimore in 1966 existed as a city caught between its industrial past and an uncertain future, where ethnic neighborhoods maintained distinct identities, while the broader civil rights movement challenged long-held social structures. The population of 939,024 residents lived in clearly defined communities where everyone knew their neighbor's business. Children played unsupervised until streetlights flickered on, and violent crime remained an abstract concept that happened to other people in other places. East Baltimore's working-class neighborhoods functioned like extended families, where front doors remained unlocked during daylight hours and mothers monitored all children from kitchen windows that served as unofficial neighborhood watchposts. The dominant Catholic Church provided not just spiritual guidance, but social structure, organizing everything from Friday night bingo games to summer baseball leagues that gave young men alternatives to street corner temptations. Local businesses operated on handshake agreements and credit extended based on character rather than financial statements. St. Casimir's Parish, where the Sullivan family had worshipped since arriving from County Cork in 1923, anchored the community's social life through its associated clinic, school, and numerous charitable organizations. The clinic, established in 1954 through diocesan funding and community donations, provided affordable healthcare to families whose industrial jobs offered little in terms of medical benefits. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers from throughout Baltimore contributed their time and expertise, creating a medical facility that served as much as a community gathering place as a healthcare provider. The political landscape of 1966 Baltimore reflected broader national tensions, with Mayor Theodore McKeldin navigating between progressive civil rights advocates and conservative constituents resistant to social change. The Vietnam War's escalating casualty figures meant that working-class neighborhoods like East Baltimore contributed disproportionate numbers of young men to military service, creating an atmosphere where traditional values were simultaneously celebrated and questioned by a generation coming of age during unprecedented social upheaval. October 15, 1966, began as an unremarkable Thursday in Margaret Sullivan's carefully structured life, a routine that would be reconstructed minute by minute through witness testimonies and her own meticulous diary entries. At 6:15 a.m., she attended morning mass at St. Casimir's, where Father Michael O'Brien noticed her kneeling in the third pew, her usual spot inherited from her grandmother's decades-long tradition. Mrs. Eleanor Kowalski, who sat behind Margaret every morning, remembered her appearing peaceful and focused, like she always did during prayer. At 7:45 a.m., Margaret stopped at Kowalski's corner store on Eastern Avenue, purchasing a small bottle of milk and a day-old Danish pastry that constituted her typical breakfast. Store owner Stan Kowalski recalled her mentioning excitement about a letter from Georgetown University's pre-medical program that she expected to receive that afternoon. She paid with exact change, counting out coins from a small leather purse her mother had made from scraps of material left over from her sewing work. By 8:30 a.m., Margaret had arrived at Dr. Hartley's clinic, where receptionist duties included organizing patient files, answering telephone calls, and providing comfort to nervous patients awaiting examination. Dr. Hartley's nurse, Ruth Pemberton, later testified that Margaret seemed particularly animated that morning, discussing her college application timeline and expressing gratitude for the physician's letter of recommendation. The morning passed quietly with routine appointments, childhood vaccinations, elderly patients seeking treatment for arthritis, and a young mother bringing her infant for a wellness check. At 12:15 p.m., Margaret walked 3 blocks to St. Casimir's basement cafeteria, where parish volunteers served inexpensive lunches to working families and individuals struggling with temporary financial difficulties. She sat with Mrs. Anna Kowalski, an elderly widow who had befriended Margaret's grandmother decades earlier. Their conversation, overheard by several nearby diners, centered on Margaret's college plans and her concerns about financing her education without burdening her parents' already strained resources. Returning to the clinic at 1:00 p.m., Margaret spent the afternoon organizing medical supplies that had arrived that morning. A shipment of bandages, antiseptic solutions, and children's vitamins donated by a pharmaceutical company. Dr. Hartley observed her systematic approach to inventory management, noting how she created detailed lists that would help the clinic track supplies more efficiently. Her last official duty involved scheduling follow-up appointments for 3 patients, carefully noting times in the appointment book with her characteristic precise handwriting. At 4:45 p.m., Margaret completed her work duties and began walking toward the Enoch Pratt Library branch on Eastern Avenue, where she had reserved study materials for her upcoming college entrance examinations. Mrs. Helen Kowalski, sweeping her front steps at 1847 South Conkling Street, waved to Margaret as she passed, noting that the young woman appeared to be carrying additional books in her canvas bag. This interaction, witnessed by several neighbors, represented the last confirmed sighting of Margaret Sullivan alive. The discovery of Margaret's body at 6:25 a.m. on October 16, 1966, shattered the illusion of safety that had enveloped St. Casimir's parish for generations. Thomas McKenna, arriving early to unlock the church for morning mass, found the heavy wooden side door slightly ajar, an anomaly that immediately triggered his concern. Stepping into the dimly lit vestibule, his flashlight beam illuminated a scene that would haunt him for the remainder of his life. Margaret lay positioned near the altar rail, her auburn hair fanned across the cold marble floor in a pattern that suggested careful arrangement rather than natural fall. Her green wool coat remained buttoned, and her leather shoes were placed neatly beside her feet, details that suggested her killer had spent considerable time organizing the scene. The canvas bag containing her study materials sat unopened near the church entrance, its contents undisturbed, and her small purse still containing the $3.47 she had earned that week. Baltimore Police Department's initial response team, led by Detective Lieutenant Frank Morrison, documented a crime scene that defied easy explanation. The absence of obvious signs of struggle within the church sanctuary suggested that Margaret had either been killed elsewhere and moved, or had been rendered unconscious before being brought inside. Preliminary examination revealed no evidence of sexual assault, ruling out the most common motive for attacks against young women during that era. Physical evidence recovered from the scene included several items that would prove crucial decades later when advanced forensic technology became available. A single strand of dark hair, inconsistent with Margaret's auburn color, clung to the wooden altar rail approximately 18 inches from where her head had been positioned. Partial fingerprints, lifted from the church's side door handle, and several prayer books provided investigators with evidence that someone other than Margaret had handled these items recently. Most significantly, crime scene photographers documented a small bloodstain on the marble steps leading to the altar, a stain that appeared to have been partially cleaned but remained visible under careful examination. The pattern suggested that Margaret had suffered a head injury, though the precise cause of death would require extensive autopsy examination by the city's overworked coroner's office. Father O'Brien's initial reaction combined shock, grief, and a protective instinct toward his parishioners, who would struggle to comprehend how violence had penetrated their sacred space. Margaret was one of God's special children, he told investigators, his voice breaking with emotion. She had plans to heal people, to make the world better. Why would anyone want to harm such a beautiful soul? His testimony revealed that the church doors were typically locked by 9:00 p.m., suggesting that either Margaret's killer possessed a key or had found alternative means of entry. The discovery sent shockwaves through East Baltimore's tight-knit community, where residents had never imagined that evil could invade their most sacred spaces. Within hours, neighbors gathered on street corners sharing theories, fears, and memories of Margaret's kindness, while mothers began accompanying their children to school and insisting they return home before dark. The sense of safety that had defined their neighborhood for generations evaporated in a single morning, replaced by suspicion and fear that would linger for decades. Have you ever felt completely safe in your own neighborhood, only to have that security shattered by unexpected violence? Let us know in the comments how communities can heal from such devastating losses. Baltimore Police Department's 1966 investigative capabilities reflected the limitations of an era when forensic science remained in its infancy and detective work relied heavily on witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and investigator intuition. The 12-member detective squad assigned to major crimes handled everything from armed robbery to homicide across a city of nearly 1 million residents, creating caseloads that frequently overwhelmed available resources and compromised thorough investigation. Detective Lieutenant Frank Morrison, a 23-year veteran with experience investigating 17 previous homicides, initially focused on identifying individuals who possessed both motive and opportunity to kill Margaret Sullivan. His methodical approach involved interviewing family members, friends, co-workers, and anyone who had interacted with Margaret during her final weeks of life. The investigation quickly identified several persons of interest whose relationships with Margaret warranted deeper examination. The first suspect to emerge was Robert James Kowalski, the 24-year-old nephew of the corner store owner, where Margaret made her final purchase. Robert had recently returned from military service in Vietnam, struggling with what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, but was then dismissed as simple readjustment difficulties. Several neighbors reported seeing Robert drinking heavily in local taverns and making inappropriate comments about young women in the neighborhood, behavior that marked him as a potential threat. Robert's connection to Margaret extended beyond casual store interactions. He had repeatedly asked her to accompany him to movies and social events, requests she had politely declined while maintaining friendly relations. His uncle Stan revealed that Robert had expressed frustration about Margaret's rejection, stating that she thought she was too good for working guys like him because of her college ambitions. On the evening of October 15th, Robert claimed to have been drinking at Murphy's Tavern on Eastern Avenue, an alibi supported by bartender testimony, but considered unreliable due to the witness's own alcohol consumption. Investigators discovered that Robert possessed a key to St. Casimir's Church through his volunteer work, maintaining the building's heating system, providing him with both access and familiarity with the layout. However, extensive questioning revealed no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, and his military service record suggested someone more likely to commit impulsive violence rather than the careful staging evident in Margaret's murder. After 3 weeks of investigation, Robert was eliminated as a suspect when witnesses confirmed his presence at the tavern until nearly 2:00 a.m. on October 16th. The second person of interest emerged through Margaret's employment at Dr. Hartley's clinic. David Michael Chen, a 28-year-old medical student completing rotations at various Baltimore healthcare facilities, had worked closely with Margaret during September 1966 while gaining experience in family practice medicine. Dr. Hartley described David as brilliant but socially awkward, someone who struggled with appropriate boundaries in professional relationships. Ruth Pemberton, the clinic's head nurse, reported observing David making personal comments about Margaret's appearance and asking detailed questions about her personal life that exceeded normal collegial interest. Margaret had confided to Ruth her discomfort with David's attention, describing him as intense in a way that makes me nervous, according to Ruth's statement to investigators. David's academic records revealed a pattern of difficulty with female classmates and supervisors, suggesting potential issues with women in authority or professional settings. David's alibi for October 15th centered on his claim of studying at Johns Hopkins Medical Library until the building closed at 10:00 p.m., followed by returning to his boarding house room, where other residents could supposedly verify his presence. However, investigation revealed that the library's sign-in procedures were informal and that his boarding house roommates were often absent due to their own academic obligations. David's nervous behavior during police interviews, including excessive sweating and contradictory statements about his evening activities, heightened investigator suspicions. Most concerning was David's knowledge of St. Casimir's Church layout, gained through his treatment of several elderly parishioners who had invited him to attend Sunday services. He understood the building's entry points, the location of keys, and the church's evening security procedures. However, forensic examination of his clothing and personal belongings revealed no evidence connecting him to the crime scene, and his medical school supervisors vouched for his character and professional dedication. After 6 weeks of investigation, David was cleared when a boarding house resident recalled seeing him return at approximately 9:30 p.m. and hearing him studying in his room until well past midnight. The investigation's third major suspect presented the most complex and ultimately frustrating avenue of inquiry. Father Michael O'Brien, despite his position as the parish priest, attracted investigator attention due to his unusual behavior following Margaret's death and several concerning aspects of his personal history that gradually emerged during the investigation. The revelation that Margaret's former neighbor had participated in memorial services while harboring such a dark secret sent shockwaves through those who had known them both. Detective Rodriguez later revealed that surveillance footage from the 2001 memorial showed Patricia standing just 3 feet from Margaret's parents, her head bowed in apparent prayer. The audacity was breathtaking, Rodriguez stated during a press conference. She had inserted herself into their grief, becoming part of their support system while carrying the knowledge of what she had done. This psychological manipulation extended far beyond mere attendance at public events. Patricia had maintained correspondence with Margaret's mother, Helen Morrison, for over 2 decades following the murder. The letters, discovered during the search of Patricia's home, revealed a calculated pattern of emotional manipulation. In one letter, dated December 1975, Patricia wrote, "I think of Margaret often during the Christmas season. She had such a kind spirit, always helping others at the clinic. I pray that whoever took her from us will face judgment." The cruel irony of these words, written by Margaret's own killer, demonstrated the depths of Patricia's deception and the psychological torture she had inflicted on the grieving family. Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic psychologist who has studied similar cases, provided insight into Patricia's behavior over the decades. What we see here is a classic example of a psychopathic individual who derives satisfaction not only from the initial crime, but from the ongoing suffering of the victims' families, Dr. Chen explained. The decision to remain close to the family, to comfort them while knowing the truth, suggests a profound lack of empathy, combined with a need for control and manipulation. This analysis helped explain Patricia's seemingly inexplicable actions throughout the years following Margaret's death. The psychological profile that emerged during the investigation painted a picture of a woman driven by jealousy and resentment. Court documents later revealed that Patricia had harbored deep animosity toward Margaret, stemming from professional jealousy and personal inadequacies. Margaret's natural compassion and skill with pediatric patients had earned her recognition from Dr. Father Thomas Brennan, the clinic's director, while Patricia struggled with patient relationships and had received multiple complaints about her bedside manner. Evidence presented during the trial showed that Patricia had been passed over for a promotion that ultimately went to Margaret just weeks before the murder. Testimony from former clinic staff revealed that Patricia had become increasingly hostile toward Margaret, making snide comments about her colleagues' work and spreading rumors about her personal life. Nurse Elizabeth Harper, who worked alongside both women, testified that Patricia had once said, "Some people think they're better than everyone else. They need to be brought down a peg or two." The manipulation extended to Patricia's own family, who had lived unknowingly with a killer for decades. Her husband, Robert Cunningham, whom she married in 1971, testified that Patricia had never mentioned being questioned in connection with Margaret's death. Their 3 children, now adults, struggled to reconcile the mother they knew with the woman capable of such violence. Son Michael Cunningham, speaking to reporters after the trial, said, "We're trying to understand how the woman who bandaged our scraped knees and read us bedtime stories could have done something so horrible. It's destroyed our sense of reality." The impact on Margaret's surviving family members was equally devastating, but in a different way. Helen Morrison, Margaret's mother, had passed away in 2008, never knowing that her daughter's killer had been among those who had comforted her in her grief. Margaret's brother, James Morrison, now 68 years old, expressed conflicting emotions about the resolution. "Part of me is grateful that we finally have answers, that Margaret can rest in peace," he stated. "But another part of me is angry that my mother died without knowing the truth, that she suffered all those years believing her daughter's killer was some stranger who had vanished." The trial, which began in November 2016, drew significant media attention and packed courtrooms daily. Prosecutor District Attorney Michael Torres presented a methodical case built on the DNA evidence, witness testimony from the original investigation, and Patricia's own contradictory statements made over the years. The defense, led by attorney Rebecca Martinez, attempted to argue that the DNA evidence had been contaminated during decades of storage, but forensic experts testified that proper preservation protocols had been followed throughout. Key testimony came from Dr. Brennan, now 84 years old, who had continued to operate the clinic until his retirement in 1995. He testified about both women's employment at the clinic and confirmed the tension that had existed between them. "Margaret was exceptional with the children," Dr. Brennan recalled. "She had a gift for calming frightened youngsters and earned their trust immediately. Patricia, while competent medically, struggled with the interpersonal aspects of pediatric care. The children sensed something cold about her." The trial also featured testimony from several former patients of the clinic, now adults, who remembered both nurses. Maria Santos, who had been 7 years old when treated at the clinic in 1965, provided chilling testimony. "I remember being afraid of Nurse Patricia," Santos testified. "She had these cold eyes, and she was rough when giving shots. But Nurse Margaret was like an angel. She would hold my hand and sing little songs to distract me from the pain." Perhaps most damaging to Patricia's case was her behavior during police interviews following her arrest. Detective Rodriguez testified that Patricia had initially denied remembering Margaret well, claiming they had barely worked together. However, when confronted with evidence of their close working relationship and the professional jealousy that had existed, Patricia's story changed multiple times. In one recorded interview, she stated, "Maybe I was a little envious of how everyone loved Margaret. She made the rest of us look bad." The DNA evidence remained the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the forensic scientist who had processed the evidence, explained to the jury how advances in DNA technology had made it possible to extract usable genetic material from degraded samples. The probability that this DNA belongs to someone other than the defendant is approximately 1 in 7. 2 billion, Dr. Walsh testified. This represents a virtual certainty that Patricia Cunningham left biological evidence at the crime scene. Defense attorney Martinez argued that Patricia could have left DNA evidence at Margaret's apartment during innocent visits as a friend and colleague. However, prosecutors countered that the location of the DNA evidence, found embedded under Margaret's fingernails and on her torn clothing, was consistent with a violent struggle rather than casual contact. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with the jury deliberating for only 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder. Judge Robert Kim sentenced Patricia to life in prison without the possibility of parole, stating, "The defendant not only took the life of an innocent young woman, but compounded that evil by tormenting the victim's family for decades through calculated deception and manipulation." The community's reaction to the verdict was mixed, with some expressing relief at the resolution, while others struggled to process the betrayal. Many parishioners of St. Catherine's had known Patricia as a devoted church member who had volunteered for numerous charitable activities. Pastor David Williams, who had known Patricia for over 30 years, said, "This has shaken our faith community to its core. We're reminded that evil can hide behind a mask of respectability, and that we must look beyond appearances to truly know someone." The Morrison family established the Margaret Morrison Foundation for Pediatric Care in 2017, using funds from a settlement with the parish and donations from community members. The foundation provides scholarships for nursing students specializing in pediatric care and has funded improvements to several children's medical facilities in the Baltimore area. James Morrison serves as the foundation's president and has become an advocate for cold case investigations and victims' rights. The case has also had implications for law enforcement procedures and cold case investigations. The Baltimore Police Department has since established a dedicated cold case unit and is committed to reviewing DNA evidence in unsolved cases using updated technology every 5 years. Detective Rodriguez, who has become something of an expert on cold cases, frequently speaks at law enforcement conferences about the importance of preserving evidence and maintaining hope for resolution. Patricia Cunningham, now 74 years old, remains incarcerated at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. She has reportedly shown no remorse for her actions and has maintained her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against her. Prison officials describe her as a model prisoner who keeps to herself and participates in few activities. The resolution of Margaret Morrison's murder serves as a powerful reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still be achieved through persistence, advancing technology, and the dedication of law enforcement professionals. It also highlights the importance of preserving evidence and never giving up hope, even when cases seem impossible to solve. For the Baltimore community, the case represents both closure and a sobering lesson about the capacity for evil to hide in plain sight. The memorial garden at St. Catherine's Parish, where Margaret's name is engraved alongside other community members who died too young, has become a place of reflection not only about her life, but about the nature of justice and the long arc of truth. The story of Margaret Morrison's murder and its eventual resolution continues to resonate with true crime enthusiasts and criminal justice professionals alike. It demonstrates how modern forensic science can breathe new life into decades-old cases and provide answers that seemed forever lost to time. Most importantly, it serves as a testament to Margaret's memory and ensures that her tragic death was not in vain, having led to improvements in both investigative procedures and community awareness about the signs of workplace violence and manipulation. As we reflect on this case, we're reminded that behind every cold case statistic is a human being whose life was cut short, a family left to grieve, and a community forever changed. Margaret Morrison was more than just a victim. She was a dedicated healthcare professional, a beloved daughter and sister, and a young woman with dreams and aspirations that were cruelly extinguished. Her memory lives on not only in the foundation that bears her name, but in the countless lives that continue to be touched by the lessons learned from her tragic story and its ultimate resolution. The psychological aftermath of Patricia Cunningham's conviction rippled through Baltimore's medical community in ways that experts hadn't anticipated. Dr. Robert Chen, a psychiatrist specializing in workplace violence, conducted interviews with former St. Catherine's Parish Clinic employees as part of a broader study on long-term psychological manipulation in professional settings. His findings, published in the Journal of Occupational Psychology in 2018, revealed disturbing patterns of behavior that had gone unrecognized for decades. What emerged from these interviews was a portrait of systematic psychological terrorism, Dr. Chen explained during a medical conference in Chicago. Patricia hadn't simply murdered Margaret and disappeared. She had spent 48 years carefully maintaining relationships with people who might have suspected her, gradually steering conversations and manipulating memories to protect herself. Former clinic volunteers described how Patricia would often bring up Margaret's case during social gatherings, expressing theories about potential suspects and lamenting the lack of justice for her dear friend. Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, who had volunteered at the clinic's reception desk from 1965 to 1985, recalled particularly chilling interactions with Patricia during the 1970s. Patricia would sometimes get this distant look when we talked about Margaret, Walsh testified during post-trial depositions. She'd say things like, "I wonder if Margaret suffered, if she knew what was happening to her. At the time I thought she was just deeply affected by losing a colleague, but now I realize she was reliving what she had done." The investigation files, made public following Patricia's conviction, revealed the extent of her manipulation efforts over the years. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Patricia had contacted the Baltimore Police Department 17 times between 1966 and 2010, always claiming to have remembered new details about Margaret's behavior or potential suspects. These calls, initially viewed as the well-meaning efforts of a concerned former colleague, were actually calculated attempts to monitor the investigation's progress and misdirect suspicion. In a particularly disturbing recording from 1984, Patricia contacted Detective William Harrison, who had inherited the cold case, claiming to have suddenly remembered seeing Margaret talking to a strange man outside the clinic. Her detailed description led to a 6-month investigation into a completely innocent individual who happened to match her fabricated account. "She was like a chess player, always thinking several moves ahead," Harrison reflected after Patricia's conviction. "Every contact she made with us was designed to reinforce her image as a helpful witness, while simultaneously throwing us off her trail." The trial had also uncovered evidence suggesting Patricia may have been involved in other suspicious incidents at medical facilities where she worked after leaving St. Catherine's. Detective Rodriguez's team investigated 3 unexplained deaths at nursing homes where Patricia was employed between 1970 and 1995. While statute of limitations issues prevented prosecution, the pattern raised disturbing questions about her activities over the decades. Mrs. Eleanor Kowalski, who died in 1992 at Sunset Manor Nursing Home where Patricia worked as a supervisor, had been in relatively good health before suffering a sudden, unexplained cardiac episode. Her son, Michael Kowalski, approached investigators after Patricia's arrest, expressing suspicions he had harbored for years. My mother was terrified of Patricia, he revealed. She said Patricia would come into her room late at night and just stand there watching her sleep. The night before she died, my mother grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't let the cold nurse near me anymore." Similar concerns emerged regarding the 1988 death of James McKenna at Valley View Care Center, another facility where Patricia held a supervisory position. McKenna, the same man who had discovered Margaret's body 22 years earlier, had been receiving treatment for diabetes complications when he suddenly deteriorated, despite stable vital signs and responsive treatment. His daughter, Patricia McKenna, no relation to the defendant, recalled her father's final lucid moments. He kept saying, "She knows what I saw, she knows what I saw." We thought he was having dementia episodes, but now I wonder if he was trying to tell us something important. The Baltimore County District Attorney's Office ultimately decided not to pursue charges in these cases due to insufficient physical evidence and the passage of time. However, the investigations revealed Patricia's disturbing pattern of targeting individuals connected to Margaret's case. Dr. Sarah Chen's psychological profile suggested this behavior represented Patricia's attempt to eliminate anyone who might eventually piece together her involvement in the original murder. What we're seeing is a systematic campaign to silence potential witnesses, Dr. Chen explained. Patricia identified individuals who possessed knowledge that could potentially implicate her, then positioned herself in their lives during vulnerable moments. The nursing home setting provided perfect cover, elderly victims whose deaths would be attributed to natural causes, and Patricia's medical background gave her both access and knowledge of how to avoid detection. The revelation of these additional deaths devastated families who had trusted Patricia with their loved ones' care. Support groups formed throughout Baltimore County, bringing together families who now questioned whether their relatives had died natural deaths or fallen victim to a serial killer operating within the healthcare system. Mary Catherine Sullivan, Margaret's cousin who had maintained contact with Patricia for decades, struggled with overwhelming guilt about her inability to recognize the danger. "Patricia attended my wedding in 1978, Sullivan revealed during a victim impact statement. "She held my babies, sent birthday cards, came to family funerals. She was part of our extended family, someone we trusted completely. The thought that she may have harmed other people while we welcomed her into our lives is devastating. How many deaths could have been prevented if we had seen through her mask?" The case prompted significant changes in healthcare facility oversight and background check procedures. Maryland's Department of Health implemented new protocols requiring psychological evaluations for healthcare workers with access to vulnerable populations, while nursing homes across the state instituted enhanced monitoring systems for patient interactions with staff members. These reforms, dubbed Margaret's Law by advocacy groups, have since been adopted by 12 other states as model legislation for healthcare security. Detective Rodriguez, whose investigation had finally brought justice for Margaret Morrison, found herself struggling with the weight of potential additional victims. Solving Margaret's murder should have felt like pure victory, she reflected during a 2019 interview. But knowing that Patricia likely continued killing for decades afterward, that we might have prevented those deaths if we'd connected the dots sooner, it changes how you process the resolution. Justice for Margaret doesn't bring back the others. The psychological impact on Baltimore's aging Catholic community proved equally significant. Father David Williams organized special counseling sessions for parishioners struggling to reconcile their faith with the evil that had operated within their trusted institutions. Many elderly parishioners who had known Patricia personally required extensive therapy to process their feelings of betrayal and vulnerability. Faith communities operate on trust, Father Williams explained during a diocesan conference on institutional safety. When that trust is violated so fundamentally, it shakes people's beliefs not just about their fellow parishioners, but about their ability to discern good from evil. We've had to rebuild our entire approach to community relationships and volunteer screening. The Archdiocese implemented comprehensive background check procedures for all volunteers and employees, extending beyond standard criminal history searches, to include psychological evaluations and reference checks spanning back 15 years. These measures, while necessary, fundamentally altered the informal, trust-based culture that had characterized Catholic parish life for generations. Patricia Cunningham's life sentence at Maryland Correctional Institution for Women provided little closure for those affected by her crimes. Prison psychologist Dr. Michael Torres conducted extensive interviews with Patricia as part of a research study on long-term psychological manipulation. His findings, published in the American Journal of Criminal Psychology, revealed a subject completely devoid of remorse or genuine human empathy. Patricia views her actions as strategic moves in a complex game, Dr. Torres explained. She expresses frustration at being caught rather than remorse for her victims. During our sessions, she often discusses Margaret's murder in clinical terms, analyzing what she calls tactical errors in her approach. She shows no understanding of the human cost of her actions and actually seems proud of her ability to maintain her deception for so long. Prison officials noted Patricia's attempts to manipulate fellow inmates and staff members, leading to her placement in protective custody after several incidents involving younger prisoners. Her behavior patterns remained consistent even in incarceration, as she attempted to position herself as a mentor and confidant while gathering information she could potentially use for her own advantage. The Margaret Morrison Foundation, established by her surviving family members, has grown into a significant force for healthcare reform and victim advocacy. The Foundation's scholarship program has supported 127 nursing students specializing in pediatric care, while its advocacy efforts have contributed to legislative changes in 5 states regarding cold case investigations and healthcare facility oversight. James Morrison, Margaret's brother, who now serves as the Foundation's president, has become a nationally recognized speaker on victims' rights and healthcare security. His presentations to medical conferences and law enforcement training programs emphasize the importance of recognizing psychological manipulation in professional settings and the need for robust oversight systems. Margaret wanted to heal children, to make sick kids feel better, Morrison reflected during the Foundation's 5th annual fundraising dinner. Patricia perverted that same access to vulnerable people for evil purposes. Our work now is ensuring that medical facilities become safer places and that no other family endures what we experienced. Margaret's dream of healing lives on through every scholarship recipient and every policy change that protects patients. The case has also influenced criminal justice education and training programs throughout the United States. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit uses Patricia's case as a teaching example of long-term psychological manipulation and institutional infiltration by violent offenders. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, who has studied similar cases, notes the importance of understanding how predators exploit trusted institutions. Patricia Cunningham represents a particularly dangerous type of offender, Agent Walsh explained during a training seminar at Quantico. She combined intelligence, patience, and complete lack of empathy to create a decades-long campaign of violence and manipulation. Understanding her methods helps us identify similar patterns and potentially prevent future victims. The technological advances that solved Margaret's murder have led to breakthroughs in numerous other cold cases throughout Maryland and beyond. The Baltimore Police Department's Cold Case Unit, established in response to the Morrison case's success, has achieved resolution in 43 previously unsolved homicides using updated DNA analysis and digital investigation techniques. Detective Rodriguez, now serving as supervisor of the Cold Case Unit, credits Margaret's case with transforming approaches to long-term investigations throughout law enforcement. Margaret's murder taught us that evidence preservation and technological patience can overcome even the most careful criminals, she noted. We've applied those lessons to dozens of other families who deserved answers, and we continue to work cases that some people consider hopeless. The community garden at St. Catherine's Parish, where Margaret Morrison's memorial stone stands alongside tributes to other community members, has become a place of pilgrimage for those affected by workplace violence and institutional betrayal. Visitors leave flowers, notes, and small tokens of remembrance, creating an ongoing testament to Margaret's memory and the importance of remaining vigilant against evil disguised as compassion. The lasting legacy of Margaret Morrison's case extends far beyond the conviction of her killer. It serves as a powerful reminder of the capacity for evil to hide within trusted institutions and the importance of never abandoning hope for justice, regardless of how much time has passed. Most significantly, it demonstrates how one young woman's interrupted dreams of healing others ultimately led to systemic changes that continue to protect vulnerable people decades after her death. Her story remains a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of preserving evidence, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deception, no matter how long that truth remains hidden in the shadows of institutional trust and community faith.